Hi, Ben. Thank you for coming. I just wanted to ask, what is your view on the fact that bans on abortion do lead to about a 21% increase in pregnancy-related deaths when you hold that your views on abortion and abortion bans are based in the fact that you have a desire to protect life and save lives because every human being is made in God's image?
Because I think we're going to have a fundamental disconnect here. The entire abortion debate is centered on whether indeed an unborn child or a human life with potential is in fact that, or if it is just a ball of cells. If you believe that there is inherent value to a fetus, then I am seeking to preserve that life as well as the life of the mother. If you look at the raw numbers in terms of, for example, in the United States, 1 million abortions a year, let's assume that laws banning abortion in the United States were universal, those 1 million abortions go away tomorrow. That's an effective law, the abortions go away, but there's also a concomitant increase in the number of women who are seeking back alley abortions, for example. There's a concomitant increase in the number of women who are dying in pregnancy-related childbirth. That would not be 1 million. That would be a lot lower than 1 million, because 1 million women out of 1 million women, that would suggest that 1 million abortions would, if brought to term, 1 million of those women would die. That's obviously not true. So for me, an abortion prevented is a life saved. And you have to weigh that against what you're talking about, which is the life of the mother when it comes to a pregnancy. Now, even as a fan of pro-life position, and I'm a deeply pro-life person, I still have an exception for the life of the mother. So if the life of the mother is endangered by a pregnancy, then abortion would be legal. That's true for every pro-lifer in the United States, by the way, including the most pro-life people, including me. So, I think that in order to make the argument that you're making, you would have to assume that there is no cost to abortion remaining legal in terms of lives lost.
Okay, so you're doing it on a utilitarian basis.
I'm doing it on a lives saved basis, yes.
Well, yeah, so
sure,
a utilitarian
yes,
basis,
sure.
right. So then if you look at comprehensive sex education, which the US does not have, a lot of people in rural areas don't have any form of sex education. You yourself have said, and I quote, on a general level, I don't think that teachers should be talking about sex in the classroom with kids at all at any age. It's shown that comprehensive and correct sex education reduces rates of abortion and teen pregnancy. So then if your goal is to save lives, why do you not support comprehensive sex education? Because it seems like your goal is something else.
No, because these first of all, I would like to see the studies that you're citing in support of that
that study
idea.
Is the University of Washington
Okay,
study.
And there are plenty of other studies in the United States that suggest essentially no difference in, for example, unwed pregnancy in the United States.
Can I have those studies?
What, can you have them? You can look at the pregnancy rates in California, New York, Massachusetts.
I just gave you my reference.
I mean, I'm happy to email you references if you so choose. But to say, I mean, this does happen to be a topic where there is social science on both sides. I'm not saying that the study that you're citing is invalid. I'm just suggesting that there is a difference in data methods, and I'm suggesting that the single motherhood rates in the West with comprehensive sex education are miles higher than they were in, say, the 1950s when there was not comprehensive sex education. So obviously that has not militated against the amount of unwed pregnancy happening in society. So the idea that the cure-all here is comprehensive sex ed, if you could prove to me, let's put it this way, if you could prove to me that comprehensive sex ed did result in lower levels of abortion, lower levels of unwed pregnancy, and that it was values neutral, comprehensive sex ed, in the sense that what it was actually teaching is, here is how to prevent a pregnancy without ending it in abortion, then I actually don't have a huge problem with that. It depends on the age at which you're teaching kids. There are other issues that I have with comprehensive sex ed, including the fact that what is taught is not the simple biology of sex and how to prevent a pregnancy. Comprehensive sex ed simply goes a lot further than that, and I have serious moral problems with that.
It seems like you're just trying to force women into motherhood, not save lives.
And I mean, just to respond briefly to that, I'm confused as to the very language of forcing women into motherhood suggests that in a vast majority of cases in which women get pregnant, they had no part in the actual pregnancy-making act, which is not true. I've done nothing. When you get, if you or any of your friends get pregnant, that is generally not having anything to do with me, per se. So I'm confused as to why I would want you to force anything.
Hello， 大家好，我是立言，不好意思跑来串场，想要简单的做一点点讲评，好，就是最后为什么这个女大学生不高兴，好， 那是因为他觉得，如果你真的是想要减少堕胎的话，那么全面性教育是可以更好的提倡教导如何避孕。好，因为在避孕来讲，其实对于保守主义而言的话呢，并没有违反道德。因为避孕本身是连受精卵都还没有形成的情况，所以避孕是合乎道德的。但是我觉得他误会了 Ben Shapiro。Ben Shapiro 其实之所以对于所谓全面推广性教育的部分有非常大的疑虑，那是因为在美国过去泛滥的觉醒文化其实已经在教导小孩子不是单纯的去学习如何保护自己的身体，而是变成如何的去探索你的情欲，或者说探索你的性欲，变成是让他们过度的去接触探索他们自己这种根本自己可能没有想过或者说尝试过的这一个所谓情欲方面的文化。所以 Ben Shapiro 他后来也说，其实他并不排斥如果是一个好的性教育，而且是价值中立，他为什么特别强调价值是中立的，就是不带有左派的觉醒文化的思想色彩，那么他基本上是完全不反对。可是我觉得这个女生呢，她只单纯的就因为 Ben Shapiro 没有完全的支持全面性教育，就因此认为Ben Shapiro 其实并不是真的这么在乎胎儿的生命权，为胎儿发声，而只是想要让女人去做母亲。这个后面真的只能说很可惜，是意气用事的。如果两边再多一些讨论的话会更好，那也可惜。Ben Shapiro 他2023年来剑桥辩论关于这个堕胎的部分呢，派出的这个女性同学跟他讨论的时间，我觉得相对太短了，这是比较可惜的地方。
Our next question is from Kai Bevan at Trinity Hall.
Right, so thank you for coming, Charlie. My question to you, I'm a medical student, and so I'm going to throw out the big A word. I know you get asked about it a lot, but I want to hear from you what your opinion is on abortion.
Life begins at conception.
But about abortion specifically, why do you think abortion is wrong specifically?
Well, you agree murder is wrong?
I agree. Okay, so this is where we get to the question, right? Because what is it about murder you say is wrong? Like, why is murder wrong?
Well, because it's a human being, not just because it has consciousness or because it's of a certain age, because it's a human.
Well, what is it that gives human being this moral worth?
Not its consciousness necessarily.
I didn't say it's consciousness.
I know that. I can imagine it's because it is a human being because it has a soul.
And what is this soul? Where does this come from? This idea that it's...
Exactly. Again, the Greeks postulated that it is the entirety of your being. Okay, you guys can laugh. It's true. Every civilization has had a different belief, but agreed upon ethical monotheism, which is the creed of the West and what the birth certificate of my country articulates, is that every human being is more than just matter, it's more than just a clump of cells, but it also has an invisible element to you that will live beyond you.
Fine, so, can you say that comes from the Bible, or where else do you get that from?
Ethical monotheism, which is the creed of the West. And again, the Declaration of Independence mentions God 4 times. The founders were explicitly believed, not in a secular morality, but a divinely given one, of at least this idea that there is a God and you are not him. And let me ask you, what is the first stage of human development?
So this is the thing, right? We can take it from the sperm being generated in the father and the oocyte being generated in the mother, right? They fuse at birth, conception, sorry. The only thing that happens at conception is these 2 cells fuse.
Right? No, DNA is created. A zygote.
DNA is not created.
A DNA, no, that's not true. The DNA, DNA coding at the zygote. Hold on, time out.
I'll let you finish.
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
Charlie,
does a zygote have a unique marker?
You have to let me speak. You have to
answer it, yes or no. Does a zygote have a unique marker?
Define a unique marker.
Meaning, can you differentiate the DNA coding between the mother and the zygote if you examine it under a deoxyribonucleic acid analysis? Can you?
Only purely because the addition comes from the father.
Oh, so it is something different.
Charlie, DNA is not created. DNA is not created. You have, the father has his own genome, the mother has her own genome. They fuse. This is why you have the same characteristics, similar ones to your mother, similar ones to your father. That's why you have similar characteristics to your siblings. DNA is not created, right? So when you ask me, where does a human being come from? I can say to you, it starts at conception, but all conception is these 2 cells joining, right? But these 2 cells were created, the mother's cells were created long before, they were created when she was a fetus. So there's none of this DNA being produced, right? So we can't establish, the only thing that happens at conception is these two cells fuse. Now this idea that means that for some reason suddenly that moral worth comes in, but it wasn't there before when you had these 2 cells who had half the DNA. But suddenly there's a
Correct.
flip of a
Yes, something
switch.
magical happens at that.
It's not magical, Charlie. We know about this.
Well, hold on.
Charlie.
Time out. Hold on.
Charlie, I promise you, I'm not trying to score points. I'm not trying to score points on you. This is genuine.
We call it the miracle of life for a reason. We've not been able to yet replicate human life development outside of the womb.
We call it the miracle of life because yes, it's something beautiful. The ability to
exactly.
form a new.
Magical.
It's not. You say magical as in it's beautiful. It's an incredible thing that happens, of course. But it's not incredible in the sense we don't know what's going on. There's no new DNA coming out of nowhere.
Hold on, but time out. Isn't there a separate DNA though than the mother?
Yes, from the father.
Okay, yes, but it's not the father's DNA either. A new coding is created.
Charlie,
you are a blend of the two. And so when did your life begin?
Okay, so
when did your life begin?
I mean, again, this comes from what you define as where life starts. You can say life starts at conception, but I'm telling you, I believe that's just an arbitrary point, right? That's just the moment these two cells fuse. Now, you say about this mother thing. So the way DNA is arranged in a cell is it's arranged in chromosomes. Chromosomes are paired up. So you have one from the mother, one from the father, typically, in a healthy individual, right? Now, you can take those maternal chromosomes out and you can find that this is who the person's mother is. And you can do the same with the father. Now, the reason you are different to your mother and father is because some of those chromosomes express genes that are different from each other. And so those genes interact and that's what gives rise to you, right? But there's no space for any kind of moral framework to come into that until you consider that a human being is capable of consciousness and of suffering. But if you take that out of the equation, the fact that these two DNA, whatever they call molecules, right? These two DNA molecules are fusing, that does not suddenly flip a switch that attributes moral worth to that individual. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to score points.
Right, then, by what moral standard do you believe that?
I believe that if an individual is capable of suffering, then it's wrong. Now, can I explain my opinion on abortion, just so you can understand? I would agree, as many reasonable people would, that at 9 months, it's unreasonable to expect someone to get an abortion, right? Unless you have some extreme circumstances. But for an elective abortion seems a bit radical to me. But it also seems radical to say that a woman who has just, the cells have just fused, to deny her of an abortion also seems wrong to me. Because that zygote is not capable of suffering, as far as we know.
So by what moral standard? Is that just your opinion? Where did you get that moral standard from?
Because suffering is a bad thing. We all know suffering is a bad thing. That's an objective fact, right?
Well, hold on. So you do believe in objective morality?
I believe that suffering is an objectively negative
So if you can't feel it, is it okay?
What do you mean if you can't?
You can't feel the pain, is it okay to inflict the pain?
In the sense that if no one's suffering from it, if you have a scenario where nobody is suffering from something, then yes, of course. Something is only a moral question if it affects someone's well-being.
So let me just make sure I understand this correctly. That if it doesn't affect their well-being, so dementia patients that don't know who they are or where they're from, can we execute dementia patients because they're confused about their well-being?
Can you imagine a scenario?
Or Alzheimer's patients.
Charlie,
Alzheimer's patients don't really know much about anything. Can we schedule them for execution because they can't technically suffer?
No, respond. So can you imagine a scenario where we lived in a society where we killed people when they suffered from dementia, were incapable of suffering, and we killed them, right? It's not a scenario that involves an absence of suffering. There's still suffering involved. Imagine you grow up thinking, my dad could be killed at any moment because he's going to get dementia. Imagine living your life thinking, I could get dementia and suddenly I'd be killed by my state.
Imagine a world where you slaughter 1 million babies every year in America.
Charlie, it's not slaughter. That's the problem.
Hold on. If it's a forcible removal from the umbilical cord of another human life, again, we have clarity but not agreement. Biologically, you know that your entire coding began at conception. Your coding,
that's
your uniqueness.
That's what I'm denying. I disagree with that.
Okay, when those two cells fused together, to use your terminology,
yes,
that is where the process of human
accepted terminology.
In the interest of time, can we bring this question to a close?
The process of human development objectively begins at that moment. Therefore, those human beings are deserving of human rights. We keep going, or do you want to?
No, thank you. Yeah, you can finish.
The process of development begins from the moment the sperm is being generated in the father, the moment the eggs are being generated in the mother. To say that suddenly the moral worth switches on when they fuse doesn't make any sense. That's just a point you've taken.
It makes perfect sense because that is when your journey as a human being, when the sperm and egg were separate, you were not yet a fused human being. You were not created uniquely.
DNA existed.
An image.
Your DNA existed. I thought.
Well, no, the parts of your DNA existed. Your DNA did not exist. It's like saying that we have a full car just because we have all the parts. It was not yet put together until conception happens and the zygote was formed. Thank you. I think we have to get
Can we move on to the next
Thank you very
question,
much.
please? Thank you.
坦白说，这个让我看到了医学系的学生其实对于所谓基因生物学呢，并不是那么的熟悉。因为我自己本身是念遗传学的硕士，所以我要在这边帮查理克克补充一下关于这名学生的一个论点的错误。按照这名学生的讲法，作为一个男生，我是父亲，那么我的每一个细胞没有错，染色体上面的 DNA 基本上几乎可以说都是一致的。可是问题是说，我在产生精子的时候呢，因为在减数分裂的过程当中，还是会再一次导致基因重组，也就是染色体互换。而这个染色体互换其实是还会再有交换部分的 DNA 序列，这样的话会产生出一种独特的基因组合。换句话说，来自父母的同源染色体呢，仍然会交换部分的基因，而使得每个生殖细胞，好比说男性就是精子，那女性就是卵子，对吧？仍然会带有独特的 DNA 组合。这也就是为什么除了所谓双胞胎，就是说已经成为受精卵再分裂双胞胎除外的话，你单就每一个精子跟卵子，尽管它是来自同一对父母，但是每一个精子跟卵子的 DNA 都会不一样。因为每一次的受精都是完全不同的基因组合。如果按照他的逻辑说，单纯只一个孩子只有一半来自父亲，有一半来自母亲，那最多只有4种变化嘛。因为我这边可以提供的就是2种不同的情况，跟母亲2种不同的情况，2得4嘛，对不对？可是并不是啊，每一个孩子生下来，你会发现没有一个孩子是一样的，除了同卵双胞胎之外，没有一个孩子是一样的。还有他忽略的一点就是，很多的人的特征，好比说我们讲身高，我们讲头发的颜色，包含你的瞳孔颜色，这些东西都是多基因遗传的，也就是说它是由多个基因来共同决定的，所以那个变异数就更大。所以为什么哪怕2个很高的父母，你都很难完全去预测说他们的孩子是不是一定就等比例的高或是矮。你会发现到每一个孩子的独特性永远都在那边，甚至你可以说，就算这个孩子他有一些部分的个性可能像爸爸，有些部分更像妈妈，可是只要是生过孩子的父母就知道，孩子他有更多的是他天生的独特性，是根本不像爸爸也不像妈妈的地方。所以每一个孩子他就是上帝独一无二创造。可是你会说是父母生的，为什么说是上帝创造的？没有错啊，因为上帝在创造生命完之后，他结束了他的创造之后，他就把这个创造的能力就交给了人，交给了父母，因为这就是上帝要延续生命创造奇迹的一个方式。以哺乳类来讲，就是从有性生殖的方式再继续创造出新的生命。所以这个同学他的逻辑其实是过度简化的。我换一个比方去想，假设今天有一个积木堆出来的飞机跟一个积木堆出来的房子，你把这2个积木所堆出来的东西各取一半的材料来重新组合，难道它出来的东西就一定是一个长得像飞机又像房子的东西吗？不会啊，它可以完全盖出一个不同的东西，好比说盖成一个城堡。好，虽然取得的原料是来自于父母没有错，可是组成的变化仍然是一个新的创造啊！怎么会只是单纯的就是我的1/2就是爸爸，我的1/2就是我的妈妈？要是照他这个逻辑的话，那么我们人所有身上的一切都是由化学元素周期表所组成的，死后的肉体也是尘堆尘，土归土。我们所有的元素组成，其实跟地球上的组成元素并没有不同。那我们是不是也要说，所有的东西其实都没有所谓的创造，对不对？它不能把这种所谓物质观念的组成元素就视作是一个没有创造的逻辑。那人所发明的一切东西都不能称作创造啊，因为都只不过是从大自然既有的元素当中所取得、所重新组合而已。可是这个组合的本身就是创造的奥妙，因为这个组合的复杂以及无可预测性，它创造出了一个连人自己都无法想象到的一个变化。不管是现在人类只是用0跟1，2个码编写出来的 AI， 其实人自己都很难去 理解未来的 AI 会发展到什么样子的一个地步。那更不要说是上帝用 ATCG 4种核苷酸所造出全世界的动植物，每一个生物的独特性都是独一无二。可是就物质本身层面来讲，那不过也就是 ATCG 4种核苷酸造成的啊。所以你说生命是不是一个奇妙的创造？当然是啦。我们保守主义其实在维护胎儿生命权的这一个议题上来讲，坦白说本来就是最困难的。因为第一个就是我们都没有办法真实的听到那些已经被堕胎的生命他们的灵魂所发出来的声音，对吗？我们永远不会知道已经被堕胎的生命他在胎儿他在肚子里的时候他当下是什么感受，但是至少可以从脑波以及心跳的显示来看，其实胎儿在被堕胎那一瞬间的时候，我必须说基本上跟谋杀一个生命是没有两样的，他们的心跳跟脑波都在显示了他们在经历极大的痛苦。如果大家真的有看过堕胎的过程的话，你就会知道，我不希望吓到观众，但是我只能说那个就像是伸到母体内去打果汁机是没有什么两样的，非常非常可怕的。但是呢没有关系，我知道这个议题查理克跟 Ben Shapiro 他们已经非常棒了，因为我们始终相信生命开始的那一刻，也就是受精卵着床成功的那一刻起，我们就不应该再用各种的外在条件、经济的因素等等等等去剥夺一个生命。很多人常常在这个议题上都会说，可是如果今天对于一个在经济困难上面他就觉得是无法负担养育一个孩子的母亲的话，难道他没有权利堕胎吗？那我要说，如果真的照这样的逻辑的话，那请问假设我是单亲妈妈，我生出了一个孩子，我养了他3年，他都必须要每天依附着我工作赚钱，他才能活下去，他完全没有谋生的能力的话，那我请问能不能够因为有一天碰到了经济问题，以至于无法养得起这个孩子的时候，我可以在他出生之后也同样能够再把他的生命做处决呢？不是一样的道理吗？难道我们对生命的负责真的只有从我们看到这个生命离开母体的那一刻起才算数吗？这个是提供出来给大家一起思考的部分。但是不论如何呢，我们仍然还是会继续坚持为胎儿的生命权来发声。我们这边是超级神队友，我们就下部影片再见，拜拜。
自分にすらも呆れて This we know, the cornerstone is Christ alone